Welcome back. Welcome back to the morning show here on Tobago Updates Television, and thank you so much for staying with us. We begin conversations this morning by speaking with Councillor Petal-Ann Roberts, who is the Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy. And we're going to have a very, very interesting conversation this morning about money. Of course, we need to know about processes, we need to know about the conversations, we need to know about the plans, the projects, and the projections. And of course, we want you to be a part of the conversation. So please ensure you leave your comments on our Facebook live stream and our YouTube channel. This morning, we welcome in our studio Councillor Petal-Ann Roberts. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me, and good morning to Tobago.
Of course, a pleasure having you in our studio this morning to talk about the things that we really want to have conversations about. You know, when we're talking about financing and budgeting and all these things, everybody wants to be a part of the conversation and they want to know what is happening, why our projects undone, why we don't have enough money, where we're getting money from. So this is a perfect opportunity to kind of explain to our people how things are done in terms of budgetary allocation and stuff like that. But I do know that you had a recent meeting. I mean, the new government has been formed, and of course, it's obvious that you will meet, or your secretaries will meet with the ministers to have conversations, to form relationships as we move forward. Could you give us a little bit of insight in terms of the meeting you had with the Minister of Finance?
Yes, so every year we have these meetings with the Ministry of Finance, particularly at the mid-year review and before the new fiscal year starts, because you know the budget for the government is somewhere in September, October. So we basically have two meetings. Now, this year's meeting is because we have a new government with new priorities, and it's at the mid-year review. Tobago has been allocated 4.35% of the budget under recurrent expenditure. We got 2.376 billion under development program, 205 million, and under European CPEP we have 18 million for European, 9.2 for CPEP. So obviously we go back to the drawing board, go back to the government after we look at how much we have spent so far. Basically under development program, which is traditionally underfunded, and even this year it has been more so than ever before because of where Tobago is in terms of its development. So we'd go back to the government and say at the mid-year what we really need, and the conversation was, there was mutual respect. There was that sense of coordination and commitment to meeting these needs that Tobago have. The minister in his preliminary conversation started with a caveat of the government's position. It is not very good. I don't want to get into too much details. I think the minister's responsibility to bring that to the country, but basically gave a general overview of where we are at as a government. And it is in that context where I had to pull back the request. Because really and truly, what we were requesting is the difference between 4.35% and the minimum that we are asking for now going forward of 5.1%. And that would bring us to about $448 million. And seeing that it gave that precursor to where our fiscal position is, could ask for 445. But we did make a request, and they did say they will try their best to accede to that request to see how best we can, just close that funding gap for this fiscal year. So far, we have transferred monies from recurrent to DP in the amount of $120 million. As I said, the recurrent expenditure is, the development program is grossly underfunded. So every year we make those shifts. So we have 44 priority projects, 38 development projects, and we have so far shifted $120 million from recurrent to development program. The conversation with the minister also included the budget for 2026. We intend to ask a minimum, as I said, of 5.1%, which represents Tobago's population share of the national population. So I told the minister, those are my expectations for Tobago. Give every Tobagonian their dollar. The conversation also included the IFMIS project. There is a project since maybe about 2005, where the government did this integrated financial management information system is really to digitize and modernize the entire accounting and budgetary process. The former administration actually spent about $64 million US. They took a loan from the IDB to do this project, and we have not gone anywhere. So I've asked the minister, and I've asked the same thing of the former Minister of Finance, to let Tobago lead this project, because Tobagonians are the only one that understand the act, the budgeting process, the way in which we collect our revenues. Our revenues are actually offset against the parliamentary appropriation. And that really means if the government at the budget said, I'm going to give Tobago $100 and we collect $20, the government is only going to receipt to us $80. And that is really it. So we have asked the government to lead that project, just give us the technical support, and we will lead it on our end, because we had challenges where the Trinidadians came and they tried to lead this. No offense to Trinidadians, but we understand our processes more than anyone else. So we've asked the leader, and he agreed. We spoke about the bond. I don't know if the minister had any background information on the bond that was issued in 2021 that is due as a bullet payment of $165 million in 2027. I have asked the former Minister of Finance on 2 occasions to give us some funds to put into a sinking fund. So in one go, we wouldn't have to find all that money. There would be some monies in a fund, and we can utilize those and then find the difference. And he said he would look at it. He didn't have all the details of the bond, but he will go back to his technical team and look at the bond and see how well we can manage the repayment to the investors. Another item that was discussed was the property tax and the TTRE, and they made that announcement about that. Obviously, you know, in our draft estimates of expenditure and revenues, we'll have to consider property tax calculations and how much we project to collect. So he did indicate that the current methodology of property tax collections, that would be no more. They are currently looking at a new methodology for collection of property tax. So therefore, we'll have to go back to the drawing board for our revenues, because property tax took up a substantial amount, especially in Tobago, for the last year or two.
Okay.
Another item that we discussed was our ability to borrow. I had meetings with the Minister of Planning as well, and I think that's the direction the country wants to go. So they did indicate that they will allow us and give us those approvals once we come to the table, and it does not affect the debt to GDP ratio too much. So yes, they have agreed to look at any proposals that we have for borrowing, because Section 51 of the Act says that we must seek the approval of the Minister of Finance in order for the THA to borrow.
As you give us all the information there in terms of the conversation that you had with the minister, and I know traditionally when administrations change and the THA has to have the conversations, it starts off favorable. But in your conversation, in your relation to him, how confident do you feel in terms of, I feel as if we might get through, we might break some ground here, and that we might actually partner on some of the projects, even if we don't get 100% of what the conversation was about? How confident do you feel that this relationship might reap some type of reward that we have not had in the past administration?
Adanna, I feel more confident than ever before. I've not only met in these conversations as Secretary of Finance, but as a technocrat. I've been in the room with over London when he was Chief Secretary, the former Secretary of Finance, Joel Jack. And this is this meeting, to me, the mutual respect and the attitude to seek Tobago's interest, I felt that more than ever before. I am hopeful that it would materialize into something positive for Tobago. The minister said he did get instructions from the Prime Minister to ensure that Tobago's needs are met and hear us out, hear what our needs are. And one of the critical matters I brought to his attention is the overdraft facility that we have to incur because we get these releases so late. And that overdraft bridges the funding gap for Tobago. And he did agree with me that a country should not be run on 2 overdrafts, because in Trinidad they run on an overdraft as well. Right. So it makes no economic sense for Trinidad to be running on an overdraft and Tobago running on an overdraft at the same time, because the cost of our overdraft is extremely high as it is uncollateralized. It's the largest, probably uncollateralized overdraft in the Caribbean. And therefore the cost to us is too exorbitant, and this is an off-budget expenditure. the bank takes their overdraft interest. It's not appropriated. It is not taken care of by the releases from central government. It actually reduces the liquidity on the bank account. So it means that when I think I have $100, I really have 50 to spend because of the overdraft interest that we have. So I explained to him the position right now in terms of liquidity and going forward, the impact that will have on our ability to run Tobago efficiently, not having the requisite resources. On paper, our position is saying one thing, but when we look into our bank account, it's saying another.
So is it the issue with the overdraft is that the releases from central government usually come too late?
Yes. So the Act says, the Tobago House of Assembly Act says, we must receive our releases quarterly or block, that means on a whole, in advance.
Yes.
So it means that at the end of this month, we should have, by, I would say, June 30th or July 1st, we should have the releases for July, August, and September. That rarely happens. We get them 2 months, 1 month. So in July, we'll get for 2 months, and in September, I will get September's releases. And really and truly, we can't plan, we can't pay. That's why the effect that you're seeing now, you know, we get the blame as an administration, but really and truly, it's how we receive money. If Tobago updates receive monies late from your customers, your clients who have to pay you, it means that you may get paid late, right? So it affects the way in which we do business, right? So I've explained that, and he agreed, and he said he will try his very best. But you know that also is hinged on how the government gets its revenues. So, but really and truly, he said he wants to look at the cost of this borrowing, of this overdraft, on both of on both ends, and try to alleviate that problem.
So I don't know if you can explain to us in terms of what really is the source of the problem and why the finances arrived to Tobago so late.
Well, as I said, I think the government doesn't get the resources as they would like. It's based on both the oil revenues and other revenues collected by the government, and actually we actually run deficits, budget deficits. That's how we run the country. It's the expenditure exceeds the revenues that the government over the years, what the government intends to collect. So I think that is one of the things. But if the Act says that we should receive the monies in a particular way, I think that we should abide by the law, and the Tobago bills, the self-government bill, that did have it actually copied and pasted that same thing in there. And even if you have a bill with that clause, that section, and they're breaking the law, it means that you could break all the sections of the law. So we need something that is more constitutionally sound, right, to protect Tobago's interests.
And you know, when you're talking about all those elements, they impact the way you prepare a budget. They impact the items on the budget and how you expect your revenue to come in terms of in time, as you mentioned before, on block and stuff like that. Talk us through now. We know that we're getting ready for budgets, right? So talk us through now where we are, the actual process. How do we get to a budget, and how do we get to a presentation? This is what we are planning, and this is what we are presenting in terms of a request for our budgets.
We basically do what we call baseline budget, where the current year is the baseline, and thus we add or we increase, we fluctuate the numbers based on inflation, the new policies, contractual obligations. So basically that's how we do our budget. And we send out what we call a call circular to the divisions, which outlines this is really the guide for the budget process. One of the things I've done as well is a budget consultation. We did that in last month, and we have an online platform for persons to go online who we weren't able to meet, because it was really difficult to meet with all the stakeholders. I did have some stakeholders that I could not meet because I had some personal matters that I had to attend to that took up that time. But we met with the agriculture sector, all the stakeholders in the agriculture sector, tourism, banking, and then we had our internal stakeholder consultations with our state companies. We have about 9 special purpose companies, and we met with them as well to advance the policy agenda and some of the challenges that they face in executing their mandates, right? So I am indicating to the public that the online portal is still open. You can go to the Division of Finance Facebook page. You could go to the THA website and you would see I had sent it to your Mr. Wood also, so he could put it up on the screen this morning so that persons can see how they can go on and give their feedback, give their recommendations to us for the budget this year. Also, the Caribbean Regional Technical Assistance Center, which is CARTAC, they came to Tobago. Actually, we requested technical assistance from them, and this came out of the IMF meetings. We have IMF meetings every year where we attend, and they ask us what are some of the things that we can offer you in terms of technical assistance. So they are doing a reform of the budgetary process, and I've taken up one of the recommendations of the reform, and one of the recommendations is to the budget presentation. I'm going to do it a little different this year. Right. So usually the budget process, so the presentation is about 3 to 3.5 hours long. This year it may be 1.5 to 2 hours long, because they have indicated that we have such a complex process, and they think that it's back to front. So we outlined all our priorities in detail in June, and in October, September, that is where we just reprioritize. So I'm doing it a little differently. This budget would outline the broad areas of focus for the government, for Tobago. And in September, October, we will elaborate further on that, because we now know what the allocations are. Okay. So I've taken the recommendations of CARTAC. They gave about 14 areas where they thought that Tobago needs to improve its efficiency in the budgetary process. One of the things they said, we have 400 development program items, line items. Some of them are of a recurrent nature. Some of them are very small capital. Right. And it really undermines what the development and the capital expenditure should look like, your budget should look like. Right. So, reform takes some time. It's a long process, but I've started to look at the recommendations of CARTAC and implement them as we go along. So the first one would be to look at the way in which I present the budget this year. Very broad, focused areas that we would like to see the THA implement. And then at the end, when we go back to when the government presents its budget, then we would elaborate on what these focal areas are.
In terms of the 14 recommendations, are you able to tell us some of the other areas that they itemized?
Yes. Well, I could try to surmise them for you briefly. As I said, we have too many development program expenditure items. They're saying that the recurrent and your DP is not aligned. They are not in sync. You're not seeing a relationship and interconnectivity between your DP and your recurrent. They thought that the process of applying for DP releases is too complex. It's not simplified for the staff. They found that the planning department had more staff than the budget department, and that said something. There were so many other things. There are some other little things that they would have said, because they look at the Caribbean and other jurisdictions that are like Tobago, and they have done this work throughout the Caribbean. So they are saying these are some of the things that worked. These are some of the things that can work for you, and we intend to see you try to implement some of the recommendations. So I've looked at them, and that is the direction in which we are going to improve the efficiency of the budgetary process, budget planning process.
And that is what we want: efficiency, efficiency, yes. Efficiency, and that's something that we've been clamoring for a very, very long time. And I must applaud you in terms of taking that approach, in terms of asking for that type of assistance to go through the processes to ensure it is simplified. I like the fact that you use the word "it's not simple enough" for the staff to engage in, because sometimes things really do take a long time.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Councillor Petal-Ann Roberts this morning. She's the Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy, and we're going through the money stuff, the things you want to be a part of. Remember, you can leave your comments on our Facebook live stream and our YouTube channel. Be a part of the conversation this morning. We have to go for a short break, but we will come back with this conversation. So in the meantime, we invite you to help us. Share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Welcome back to the morning show here on Tobago Updates Television, and thank you so much for staying with us. We continue conversations this morning with Councillor Petal-Ann Roberts as we talk about budget, the budgetary process. How do we do things and how do we get to where we want to be in terms of financing for projects to be undertaken here on the island of Tobago? Not just that, but your salaries, my salary too. So let's have the conversation and be a part. We want to hear what you have to say. Before we went to the break, Councillor, we were talking about the budgetary process. We were talking about the fact that you had that kind of conversation in terms of the recommendations that were made and the direction you're going to go now. So I want to get a little bit more into it in terms of how is the budget going to roll out now as a result of the recommendations? What are the things you are putting in place and some of the terms that we might not know and might not be aware of that we can be advised on?
Right. So, before the break, we spoke about some of the recommendations of CARTAC, and one of them I forgot to include was this manual system that we currently utilize in the THA. CARTAC did indicate that complicates everything. It's very inefficient. The manual system makes it very difficult to do this budget process. They also talk about the complexity of the DP proposal, the development program proposals. They found them not to be very straightforward, and especially you would see that manifested in the implementation of these proposals. Another one...
Before you move on, Secretary, I want to ask, does these complexities, particularly in the DP and those kind of things, does it impact the execution of projects? Does it?
Most definitely, because when you're doing your project profile, if that is not straight, clear, and I want to use the word simplified, obviously when you're implementing, you will have these challenges. So I think that is one thing. So actually what they have done for us, they have looked at our forms, our how we structure the way in which we want to present our projects, and they gave us templates to work with as well. They gave us templates for requests for releases. They found most of our forms to be very complex. So they have recommended that you utilize these forms that work in other jurisdictions. They look at also the alignment of the priorities into the budget process and that kind of thing. So the technical assistance is really, really good, and I intend to continue that conversation. Actually, they have asked me for a follow-up meeting because they want to look at the accounting stream now. And I know what the problem is. We are manual, right? We have been manual for some time. The globe is going actually, digitization is not a luxury anymore. For competitiveness, for efficiencies, everybody's using some digital platform, and we are still writing up vote books, writing up schedules, and in some cases we sign in checks manually, right? So they are looking at some of these strategies that we are using, methodologies, and saying, listen, it is time to move away from these ways and go where the world is going.
And in terms of to make that transformation, is there some sort of legal issue, or can we make that?
No, we can make those. No, so most of the recommendations are easy to implement.
Okay.
It just takes a lot of time. Change.
Yes.
Yeah, change always requires us looking at this thing, mapping what the current process is, and then mapping what the recommended process is, and just allowing persons to understand. So we have also had CARTAC training the staff. So apart from this report that I had, which is 120-something pages, staff have been trained as well. So they are actually coming back to look at the accounting and do the same thing. Give us a report, train the staff. So these recommendations are my Bible right now, especially as I'm preparing Budget 2026. Apart from this, I'm looking at, we have a strategic development planning pathway, a framework that we are working for Tobago for the next 20 years, which we have truncated into 5-year periods. That is also a document that we're using to guide the budget for 2026, because the pathway is from 2025 to 2045, right? So that is another document that we are using to align with the budget process. And finally, strategic planning, strategic selectivity, which I used in the previous budget. I actually did the revised budget or the realigned budget in October last year. I was the one that read it because I was actually appointed on June 28th when they had the budget debate. That was the day I sat in the House and sat as a member of the THA. And so I actually did the revised budget. So this year, we are going to use strategic selectivity again, where we would prioritize our development priorities in accordance with different things, feasibility, cost, risk, and see how best we can use these resources to impact all the people across Tobago.
Talking about preparing for budgets, understanding the processes, knowing the shortfalls, knowing the areas that you have to tighten up. And, I must commend again your office in terms of reaching out for that type of help. I know you mentioned that before they will give you assistance in terms of your budgetary stuff, but the technical part in terms of the processes, how do you ensure that the efficiency, things line up? You use as little time as possible to get the same results. Maximum impact is what we kind of really, really want, especially for a small island like Tobago, where sometimes it feels as if the island is too small to be waiting 2 weeks for one document.
Yes,
it's too small to
absolutely.
be waiting so long for things to happen on the island. So I must commend that, and of course we will be looking on to see how the implementation of these recommendations improve the wait time, because at the end of the day, what your clients want is speed.
Yes,
they want to come into an office.
Yes.
Correct. They want to come in and they want to be able to say this has been resolved within the same time I was in the office. I don't have to go and come, and I don't have to sit and wait. So we welcome, of course, the implementation of the recommendations made, and we're looking to see how we kind of it is implemented and how it impacts the actual operations. So we're talking about budget. Budget's supposed to be coming up sometime, and so we're waiting to know when is budget day.
Right. So budget day is the 23rd of June. At 10 a.m. And as I did indicate, it will be an abridged version because of the way in which, as I said, we took the recommendation of CARTAC on how we should really frame the budget, and then in October, we elaborate on our priorities and the areas that we want to focus on. This year, though, there are some focal points some focal areas that I want the public to know. Tourism is one, agriculture, human capital development. So not only that we're going to ask CARTAC and the IDB for technical assistance for us, I will be making an intentional and deliberate investment in training entrepreneurs. We have been giving entrepreneurs grants and loans, and we are not seeing the sustainability of businesses and businesses' life not being extended, because it's not only money. It's about the know-how. I think people generally want to know, so I will make an intentional investment in people and training. Also in the public service, it is this administration's intention to also ramp up training for the public officers. We have already started a coaching program where we have asked public servants who have worked for the last 20, 30 years to come back and be coaches and mentors for our public officers. Look at the way in which we do things and try to strengthen the way in which we do it, because there are a lot of errors and some people just don't know, and efficiency, doing things a little faster. So we intend to see improvements in the way in which we do things, both speed and efficiency, and also in terms of the quality of the public service delivery, right? So we intend to see that. Another focal area for the budget is the SME sector. That is the lifeblood of our economy. So I intend to, through the Tobago Development Fund, make an investment, financing, technical support. I've already spoken to so many different sectors. I spoke to the Banking Association of Trinidad and Tobago to look at, they did a program sometime in 2022, 2023 to bring it back again, where they have a 6-month training program for entrepreneurs. I've spoken to ICAT, which is the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Trinidad and Tobago. I've spoken to the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission to come and just talk to persons about investments and what is the right investment, and so much education, edification, sensitization for the people of Tobago. And that is the direction in which we are going. Digitization is another focal area, especially for the core responsibilities of the government. We intend to digitize a lot of the way in which we do things, right? So those are the focal areas for Budget 2026: tourism, agriculture and food security, digitization, human capital development, and the SME sector, to make that investment and to pay particular attention to this sector, not only where the investment is financial, but that technical assistance, that hand-holding, that looking at the way in which they run business and do business and manage their business and give them that support.
Secretary, I wanted to ask you something. I know you mentioned SME. I don't know if you could go into this, but is the division looking at, we know that Tobago is about 60,000 persons. There's only so much business that could take place here, but we also want persons to get into, as many persons as possible to get into entrepreneurship. Is your division looking at taking small businesses and growing them into accessing export markets so that they could have larger markets?
So I would say yes, most definitely. But I've spoken to the Minister of Planning as well. So we had the Minister of Finance on Thursday, and last week, Wednesday, we sat with the Minister of Planning. There are a lot of collaborations will be happening. I don't want to do too much overlapping here in Tobago. And central government has always given that support, especially for SMEs in terms of trade. So we intend to lean on the central government's strategies and initiatives. I do intend to have a trade unit, but not just yet. I'm a type of person that want to focus on getting a particular thing right and then move on rather than doing a number of things at the same time. I do have a proposal on my desk for a trade unit. I have a committee that is dealing with the Tobago Development Fund. I've spoken to them about having the trade unit as a part of the fund. We're still thinking that through. But I intend to collaborate, and this government intends to collaborate with the central government, as we've always tried to do. But I think now more than ever, the mutual respect and that commitment to want to collaborate with us is there. So the answer to that is yes. Getting into export markets is number one for me. I've spoken to an entrepreneur whilst on my way to Trinidad. She actually said how goods are going into New York, into the New York market. I actually sent that entrepreneur also to Jamaica to get their products out there. So definitely to scale up businesses is one of my key mandates. It's something that I want to see. I don't only want to see you stay at one place at one level, but to grow. As a matter of fact, I don't think a grant for $25,000 can do much for an entrepreneur. And it's something I really want to move away from, right? But more than that, for me, I think technical assistance is needed important. More than, because building resilience is not only that support, that financial support, but really actually showing you how to be an entrepreneur and be risk-taking and to be able to survive in an economy, notwithstanding all the challenges. And they really need that technical support. So we are leaning on all the stakeholders and all the multilateral agencies to give us.
And I totally agree, because I know a lot of persons who were able to benefit from the grant in terms of the finances. And when you look at where their businesses are, you can't really see the benefits. You can't see rewards. So that is very, very critical, especially the way how things are going. Trends are changing and evolving on a daily basis. So to equip them with what is necessary to remain relevant, I think that is very, very important. And I just want to, talk to our viewers this morning in terms of persons who are seeking grants to access this service when it becomes available, to make sure that you put yourself forward. In fact, Secretary, I don't know if this is in the plans, that it becomes policy that once you obtain a grant that you have to go through this training process.
It is policy right now, but I think I want to widen and broaden the types of training that we do, not only bookkeeping and financial statements, but there are so many other things, marketing, actually pricing. I'm speaking with the chamber now. They have a Tobago Business Advisory Services unit, an advisory services unit that they do training on how to price and cost your product. You know how some people price? If your lime is $5, I'll send mine for $6. Rather than looking at a costing mechanism and showing them in simplified ways what's the mechanism to cost a product. You have direct labor, direct materials, you have your overheads, and you have to absorb that into each unit. That kind of thing to help them to understand that. So that is where my mind is. So I'm letting the public know that there will be less financial assistance and more technical assistance coming up in the upcoming year.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming this morning, and I wish we had more time to continue the conversation, because I feel as if a lot of information was shared this morning in terms of especially understanding the shortfalls that we were carrying for all these years. We were doing these things in a sort of an archaic way, and now understanding that there's an easier way to do things, a way to streamline how the processes are done in terms of ensuring the efficiency there. So we really thank you for that. And as I mentioned before, we will be looking to see the impact and the change in terms of the wait time to ensure that we get the type of results that we've invested in, because it's an investment we're making, whether it's time or financially. It's an investment.
Yes.
So we must applaud you for that. Viewers, we are looking forward to budget. Remember, it's the 23rd of June, 10 a.m. The budget will be read, so you want to pay close attention to that. Secretary, in closing, is there any other information you want to share with our viewers this morning?
Yeah, I just need to, I felt that I needed to clear up I gave some focal areas, but that does not mean that other areas such as health and education are not important to us. But my budget will be based on stimulating the economy, accelerating growth. And there are some things that we will be focusing on. I'm saying that to say that the other areas will form part of the budget as well. But these focal areas, I think, can get us from one place to another, can accelerate, can elevate, can stimulate the economy. I am excited. I am actually hopeful. I feel a sense of promise. I feel a sense that with this new government, that Tobago will advance in its cause, in becoming the greatest little island on the planet. You just spoke about implementing these strategies and seeing the change. Change comes incrementally. I'm hoping that tomorrow we don't look forward to the changes in coming out of some of the strategies that we are going to implement, but work with us, Tobago, and we are doing the best that we can to make this island the greatest little island on the planet.
And before you go, a question just came to me in terms of when you were talking about the pillars, the core areas that you want to focus on for the budget, and you said your plan is to stimulate the economy. Can you tell us what is your primary goal and objective? Can we use that as your primary goal and objective, rather, in terms of your budget for this year?
I don't have one primary objective. I speak with entrepreneurs all the time. I speak with people who have a vested interest in how the economy is going, and obviously we know the economy is where it is because we don't have fiscal space and the amount of resources to really stimulate it. I think one of our biggest problems is how we use the resources. I do agree with that. And I've spoken about it already. I tell my technical advisor that all the time. Any room that I go into, I speak with the executive. I think as Tobagonians, even as public officers, we have to become more serious in how we utilize the resources that we have. So that is one. So it's two things. It's how we utilize the resources. So we're talking about efficiency and the amount of resources that we have. So those are the two areas that I want to look at. And that's why I spoke about human capital development. I think that people want to know how to do this thing right, but they just don't have the avenue. They just don't know. So I am going to look at that human capital development for public servants, public service delivery, for entrepreneurs in the community. You would see more initiatives to help you, to make you a better citizen, right? To hone the skills that you currently have. So those are some of the things I'd like to see to stimulate the economy. And I want to tell Tobagonians, we have to be the change that we want to see. So at many times we are depending on the government a little too much. I think we have a part to play as citizens of Tobago in getting this place to the greatest little island on the planet.
Absolutely, absolutely. Secretary, thank you once again for joining us this morning and bringing that information to us. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with Councillor Petal-Ann Roberts, Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy, as we spoke there about the budgetary process, the allocations, partnerships, collaborations, training, and all the things that will be implemented to ensure that Tobago progresses to that greatest little island on the planet that we are hoping for as we advance that cause. This is where we have to end the morning show, but it's not where we end our programming. We head on over to GMT, which is Good Morning Tobago. So stay with us, and as you stay, we invite you to help us.
Share the live, share the live, share the live.